What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. So recently I've had a couple questions on how to read wiring schematics, right? And what I'll say is, just like that video I did with that panel that was all jacked up, is just take a second, take a step back, and just look at this. And the number one thing you should do when you're starting off is just identify components, right? Find those components, which this cabinet doesn't look like this schematic anymore. I basically gutted this. This is how it showed up, and then I gutted a bunch of it and made it to how we're actually running this thing. Because this thing is set up, if you look right here, we have like a defrost clock right here. There was another relay that was in play right here. But we don't run these things off like time clocks anymore. We got boards and relays that we run this store off of. So I basically just cut it over to run off of that. But pretty simple once you kind of break these things down, right? And now how most schematics are is you have your high voltage side and your low voltage side, or your high voltage and your control, right? Depending on however you put it. So the high voltage is usually pretty standard, right? So if we follow this in, these are the service run lines. So like the factory doesn't run these, you have to run these out in the field run lines, that's what I meant. All right, that comes into the terminal block. So first, let's identify this terminal block. Pretty simple right here, right? This is your terminal block. Understand there's no power on this. We haven't even, this is a new install that we're doing for a new walk-in. So there's no power, the disconnect's off over there. There's nothing here. So I'm gonna be touching stuff, don't freak out, right? First thing it comes into is your terminal block. Terminal block's right here. Pretty simple, right? And then if we follow those lines out, it shows it goes into CC1. So what does that mean, right? You can see we have 3 normally open points, but with most of these schematics, you see that we have a legend. So if we look at C1 and we come and find, or sorry, CC, come and find it, stands for compressor contactor, right? And you can see it's labeled C1. And if we look over here, that's labeled C1. Now, are all units gonna have this? Absolutely not. Most of them that you see probably are not. This is a new one, so it's still labeled, right? And then if we follow that down, you can see it comes down. We got our head fan right here, which comes off of L1 and L2. So L1, L2 are powering our head fan. And you can see that's after that compressor contactor, right? So after the compressor contactor is going through here, which I'll show you that here in a second, right? And then also understand all of these lines on paper represent real lines inside of here, right? So this wiring that's coming into the terminal block, that's these wires that's all right here, right? Comes in, comes around. You got these 3 wires into the bottom of the terminal block, and you got our ground, which is right here. These 3 wires coming out of the terminal block of the compressor are physical wires, right? We have 3 wires coming up into the top of our compressor. So just understand, these are actual physical objects that are being depicted, right? But you keep going, right? So we have our head fan right there. You come down, you can see we have a CT. So what's a CT? All right, let's look at our legend. CT, current transducer in compressor E-box, okay? So we know we got a CT that's supposed to be on L1, and then you can see it just connects to our compressor. And that's our entire high voltage side. Now here, obviously you see we got stuff that branches off. All of this I eliminated, so I'm not too worried about showing you, because I can't show you like a physical one right there. But that's our whole high voltage side, right? It comes through, hits our contactor, comes down, head fan, CT, compressor. Pretty simple. And you can follow that all the way, going in our terminal block, out of the terminal block, into the contactor, out of the contactor. And you can see if we follow this big conduit right here, it dumps us into our compressor head. You can see where our wires are hooked up right there on our compressor. Hold on. There we go. Where our wires are hooked up right there on our compressor, you can see these 2 lines right here that are coming off of our compressor and going into our head fan, right? And then you can see this CT, we have one line of the compressor that's coming out, going through that CT, and then landing on our connections on the compressor. Okay, so like I said, all of these things represent physical items. Okay, now like I said, you want to separate your high voltage from your control voltage, or your high side from your low side. Depends, it doesn't matter, it means the same thing basically. In this case, this is our control voltage side, right? And you can see right here, if we follow this, you can see coming off of L1 and L1, L2, it comes along and it goes into these right here, F1, F2. Now for those of you that know, those are fuses. If you don't know, you can come down here. F stands for fuse. So fuse number 1, fuse number 2, and it even tells us we have 15 amps. And if you look over here, you can see, I brought it off of L2, L3, but it doesn't really matter, right? We're just picking up 2 legs of this and we're going into our fuse. And then out of that fuse, you can see it goes into T1 and T2 TS, which is terminal strip. So if we follow that, we come out of our fuses and then into T1 and T2. Okay, and then this is where people start to get kind of confused, right? Because you got a lot going on in this little section of that schematic. But all you got to do is kind of break it down. So we can see coming off of T1, we have a yellow wire that comes in. The first thing that connects to it is our 240 for our OFS, which if we come down here, oil failure switch, right? So we got a yellow wire coming out from T1 and going into our oil fail. And again, we'll trace this out. We got 1 yellow wire, 2 yellow wire. And if you look, 1 yellow wire, 2 yellow wire, right? Come down, catch this. This yellow wire should be going to our low pressure switch, high pressure switch, and then into our contactor, right? This R1 is non-existent. All of this is non-existent. This right here is non-existent. I'm still using this, but in a different way. I'll show you that in a sec. Okay, but we know that this yellow wire right here originates from T1, goes to our pressure controls and into our contactor. So let's look at that, right? So we got our contactor right here. We know this is the yellow wire. So this wire right here is this physical wire right here. And if we follow this back, all right, we do the old tug and pull method, you can see that it goes into this, okay? And if we follow this up, let me do this. So I got this contactor wire. I'm gonna pull it down. I'm gonna pull some slack out of this, all right? This is how I find a lot of wires. So I pull some slack and I make that loop. And then when I pull one of these wires, see, I can see that that's not the wire I'm looking for because it's not pulling the slack out of that loop. Try another yellow wire. And you can see that slack just came out of that wire. So I know that this is the wire that I'm pulling on. And as you can see, as we look inside this can, I'm pulling on this wire right here. Right? That's that wire I'm pulling on. And this goes into our pressure switch. All right? We got our dual pressure switch. That's just a set of switches that cut in and out on high and low pressure. Right? Pretty simple. So if we take that wire out of here, right? We know this wire we just followed going in. We take this wire and follow it back out. Let's see. We can see we're pulling on, that wire down there, right? You can see it moving. And if we take this wire, I'm gonna come over here. And if we take this wire and start pulling on it, you can see we're pulling it all the way up to here, which is at T1, right? So that's how you kind of read these things and how you follow them, is you just start at a point, you follow that physical wire, and you can literally follow it all the way through. And this is, if you're in service, especially service, You need to get to know these. These will help you so much in diagnosing electrical issues, because as everyone knows that's in refrigeration, or probably in HVAC in general, the majority of the things that we do are electrically related, right? Every now and then we'll have fucking a leak on the discharge line, or fucking, you know, we got a leak at a case. Every now and then we'll work on the refrigerant circuit, but majority of what we're doing is this electrical circuit. There's so many more electrical failures than there are refrigerant failures, right? So just study these, right? Study these a lot. Get comfortable with looking at these, because a lot of the times this can be overwhelming. When you open this up and you look at it, this can be overwhelming. But once you start breaking it down and you start breaking it into sections, right? You got your high voltage side on this, got your low voltage side or your control side on this. Once you start kind of breaking it down, identifying components, following wires, and see where they actually land, you're gonna have a much easier time. So hope that helped everybody. I'm not gonna go through this side. We could follow this all the way through, but I think y'all get the point. So I hope that helps y'all, for you guys that have been asking me to do this. And for those of you that haven't, you know, hopefully it helps you too. As always, like, subscribe, share. I appreciate y'all watching. We just hit a 3K on TikTok and YouTube, so really appreciate everybody. But yeah, thank you. Later.